Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event of Bunnies and Burrows, in which the Lapina Explorer is added to the game. So let's get into that. As far as his trait stone of yellow-blue, you'd mainly want to use that on things like Astral Spirit, Night Coronet, Dryad, and even Lapina Explorer himself earlier on in the game. And later on in the game, you'd want to use it for things like Cedric Sparkle Sack for his gold gain, Princess Elspeth for the mana generation, and Taloka for the damage, and then just put them into Mythics from there. As far as this troop itself, it is pretty decent, at least if you're early game, mid game. Beyond level 500, you probably wouldn't use it much, but anytime prior to that, this is actually one of the most solid options in the game now. It has a 4x boost ratio based on every single green that it destroys within a column and row shape. So this is the exact same destroy that something like a Elwyn ends up doing, which you can get for free from completing out the Pansville Kingdom, which is the same kingdom he's from, except he overall has a stronger boost ratio because he hits the first 2 enemies rather than just 1, even though his boost ratio on face value is lower, whereas Elwyn's is at 7, his is at 4. He hits 2 enemies, so he essentially has a 8 boost ratio in a sense, since he is hitting multiple things simultaneously, making it overall higher damage output per green that you destroy relative to the damage output of pure yellow that you destroy on Elwyn. And Elwyn was already pretty high up there for early game, and this is even higher than that. So really, really solid. Going to be using this pretty much as a replacement now for any kind of early game up to about level 500, more so up to about level 250 or so. But any low level range, this little thing will be insanely good. Other than that, it also has some additional effects on top of that. It deals damage to the first 2 enemies, of course, but it ends up moving one of the first 2 enemies to the back. So it'll be random between either the first one or the second one, and it will move them all the way to the last slot, and then it will do its damage. So that might be a little bit annoying since it's going to be scattering its damage a little bit all around, but it's going to be hitting so hard from an early game perspective that it should be fine. Other than that, it does gain some benefits from being fully traded, mostly things that will help keep it alive. It has 25% magic reduction as well, or to spell cast, as well as a 20% chance to dodge skulls, so it has a little bit well-rounded as far as durability against pretty much everything. Overall, pretty nice early game troop. That's all it's going to be used for, though. This late in the game, I will probably not use that at all. However, you can be using it to try to get 400 extra gold this week. Also, right here, start showing us Starflower. That is one of the things that ended up coming into the game as well. As you can see, it does damage to all enemies, boosted by Fae allies at a 5x boost ratio. It also summons a random Fae, which could be any Fae in the game other than itself. And also has 20% chance to transform a random enemy into a pixie, which more often than not might actually be a bad thing, since it's doing AoE damage and you generally don't want to convert them, like right at the end, right before you're about to kill them. But that is in the event key drop table if you want to go and try getting that. I already ended up maxing out mine. I think it took about 600 event keys or so, but I got all the way to Mythic with a few copies spare. But yeah, don't forget to pick her up. She's in the event key table for this week only, then she'll be out of the drop table for a month, and then she'll be in Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests from their forth going into the future. Anyways, other than that, we also have Summer Imp in the drop table now. Of course, these are seasonal every 2 months. Spring Imp just left the drop table, Summer Imp is now around. This Imp is 100% useless, however, if you want it for collection purposes, you can get it in Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests for this month and next month. However, you probably want to save your keys for this next Mythic or the following Mythic or some other time, and just try hoping you get the Summer Imp then, if you don't already have it. As far as event objectives, we have 10% to Pansvale and 10% to Wild Folk, which is almost 20% to the entire kingdom, because most things within the kingdom are Pansvale Wild Folk. As I mentioned, 400 gold if you use the new Lapina Explorer in PvP. Keep in mind, this is only PvP. He's a Lapina Explorer. It doesn't say Explorer in PvP. It just says PvP. It's kind of confusing there because of his name. But yeah, if you want to use him in PvP for a little bit extra gold, highly advised if you're a lower level player. However, later on in the game, probably just better to use a normal team. And other than that, whenever we kill reds in PvP or Explore this week, we will end up getting a bunch of gems as well as some event keys. And those event keys you might want to use immediately to try to get any new legend. 12 keys could potentially get it, though of course it could potentially take a lot more, as there are 3 legends within the drop table for this kingdom. So you could get one of the other 2, King Salinas or Silent One instead of getting the new legend. So do be mindful of that. But still, any event keys will allow you to try to obtain the new troop that was added to the game. Anyways, we already went over event keys. Of course, we have Guild Wars this week. Don't forget to go and set all of your guild defend teams before the day sets. I believe I am Paragon this week, so you will be able to get some decent data as well on everything. Also, don't forget to actually upgrade your things. I'll finish that later. But yeah, don't forget to upgrade those because you do want to, especially if you're higher up in your guild, you don't actually get all the extra points unless you actually have at least level 1 in each of them. Make sure to at least do level 1 for each generally. It's pretty cheap. You only really go to 3, 4, and 5 if you're trying for higher up on the leaderboards. Anyways, that's Guild Wars. Plays out the same as it always does. We'll be going over teams for that throughout the week as we do our streams. Other than that, as far as events this week, we have quite a few. As far as the factions, they have reset all the way back to All-Seeing Eye, so now it's going to go All-Seeing Eye, Hall of Guardians, Crypt, so on and so forth through all of the factions in order in which they were released. So it's going back through that cycle now. The Wednesday pet is going to be the pet for bonus EXP, pretty standard, nothing really too special there, but still definitely make sure to do it if you don't already have the pet, or even do it just for the food. And other than that, we don't have any event on Thursday because this Friday we are getting a new hero class. This hero class should be pretty decent. It's somewhat similar to Frost Mage, except it's the inverse of it. Rather than having a lot of freeze with a little bit of submerge, this is going to have a lot of submerge with a little bit of freeze. Other than that, this hero class has a lot of synergy within its kingdom. It's a Merlantis Merfolk, and almost all of Merlantis is Merfolk. Unlike Frost Mage, which had almost no synergy whatsoever with its kingdom, this one will be extremely, extremely good within the context of its own type within its kingdom. So we'll see how that ends up panning out. Overall, looks like it could potentially be a top 5 hero class. It's not going to be Titan level good, but it will be the best emerging hero class in the game. So for whatever that is worth, that it will be able to do. And it's also decently well-rounded as far as everything that it has on all of its abilities. Good at mana generation, good at surviving. Not really a good first slot though, but other than that, it should be good for most other purposes. Probably a 3rd or 4th kind of slotted hero class for the most part. Other than that, Soulforge, there are some things worth crafting this week. Most noteworthy 2. The biggest one being there is High King Iron Gut. High King Iron Gut is potentially even a first craft these days. Definitely pretty good to consider as a 2nd or 3rd after maybe like Infernus or Fair Shra. Though if you really wanted something better for delves, you could theoretically craft this as the very first thing you ever craft. This thing is insanely, insanely strong in delves. It ends up getting an extra turn every single time it casts. And the main thing that makes it really decent is the fact that it has a Devour chance based on its attack. Obviously, earlier on in the game, your attack value might be a little bit lower. However, in the context of delves, you'll likely have your delve leveled some, so you're automatically getting some extra attack from that. You also, of course, since it's a Devour option, get to steal all of their attack when you devour them. So within the context of delves, after you get your first Devour, regardless of what your attack originally was, you should be reaching nearly 100%, if not 100% Devour rate. And then you can start killing everything out in one shot from there. And it is just really good in any delve that you can do it in, particularly blue ones, because then you could use Mountain Crusher, Apothecary, High King Iron Gut, and then one other option, and simply go with that team and just destroy everything with Iron Gut Devours. You do have to be careful with things that have immune to Devour, but you can use Transform Troops or Essence of Evil and other similar things, like Curse options, like off of the Mirage Queen and stuff like that, in order to counter out these troops that will have immune to Devour. But other than that, pretty much the strongest delve troop in the entire game at this current moment in time. So highly advised if you need something to actually kill through delves, if you're struggling to get past like 200 or something, that is definitely a troop to pick up because you'll eventually need it for delves anyways. Other than that, if you're earlier on in the game and you still don't happen to have a copy, it is one of the few mythics that is actually, or what's one of the few legends that is actually worth crafting, and that is Dragon Soul. It's the best soul farming method pretty much in the game. It ends up gaining 15 souls per cast, ends up accumulating a bunch of mana with a decent chance of getting an extra turn, and it's also pretty good in early game and mid game dragon teams, since as the second you get it, regardless of how far you have it leveled or traded, it'll be doing, if you use it in a team of 4 dragons, it'll be doing 20 damage to all enemies, and has a base minimum of 11 damage to all enemies, and even if it gets webbed or magic reduced, it'll still be able to do that much damage, since all of its damage is based on how much dragons are on the team, with a base value of 8, and of course it counts itself, so a minimum of 11. So both of those, really good to consider getting if you don't currently have either of those, with High King Iron Gut, of course, being the main one you would want to consider. Anyways, next order of business. Let's go and mess around with a bunch of teams. No, not against a lesser team. Let's just take a middle team for now. So I have a few teams I just wanted to show real quick. I will be testing more stuff with Starflower into the future, but it's going to be somewhat okay. It's not like an extremely overpowered kind of legend. It does have an interesting mechanic in that it has a 50% chance at the start of every battle to Fairy Fire, which could theoretically give you Fairy Fire on turn 1, which could potentially be decent. But overall, I feel like Queen Titania in general is going to be better than this thing in most situations, especially since how easily Queen Titania can end up getting an entire team Fairy Fired. As you can see, we already got one Fairy Fire there, and over time we keep getting Fairy Fires. You keep in mind this troop will be able to re-Fairy Fire something that's already Fairy Fired. So for example, if we Fairy Fired again, it could potentially end up hitting this exact same troop that already has it on. But this thing ends up doing an okay amount of damage to all enemies, has Arcane, so you can extra turn loop to try to get it more damage. That's particularly noteworthy since every magic it gets is technically 4 additional damage, since it's hitting 4 things. It also has a boost ratio based on Fey. Unfortunately, it itself does not count as Fey, and most teams you would use it in are actually Wild Folk teams, not necessarily Fey teams. That's a little bit annoying in that regard, but overall, if you use it with Fey, it will end up gaining quite a substantial amount of damage. Similar to how Queen Titania gains 4 damage per thing, this ends up gaining 5. A little bit higher since it has no chance of gaining an extra turn. And as you can see there, it does have a chance of transforming things into pixies. This is both good and bad. The main bad thing about it is primarily an AoE damage source since it's hitting all enemies simultaneously. And this is actually bad that it ends up doing these fairies occasionally, simply because it's going to get in the way of you trying to actually kill out the enemy. For example, we probably would have wiped out the entire team there if it didn't get that transform, but since it did get that transform, it reset its HP back to normal, and it made it so it survived. So I'm not really sure if that 20% chance to transform something into a pixie is actually that useful on it. Obviously, if you're up against a really strong team and it happens to get rid of a core troop, then it might be useful in that regard, but other than that, I don't really foresee it really coming into play. And of course, I didn't really mention it much, but I did do this with Bard. Bard gives all yellow allies 1 stat per turn, also counts as a Pan's Veil Wild Folk, and every single thing on this team is a Pan's Veil Wild Folk, so we end up getting a ridiculously huge amount of bonus stats, as you can tell by how high our stats are, and you can see them over here as well. We end up getting 3 different bonuses, all at max, due to it being pure yellow, pure Pan's Veil, and pure Wild Folk. A little bit extra stats from that. Anyways, next order of business, a little bit more of a kind of rush down team, so we'll use it with this. Hopefully we can actually rush down quick enough to kill Divine Ishbala Quillen. That, of course, is one of the better skull spam options in the game, but hopefully we'll be able to kill that. I'm actually not going to take those greens just because we're going to explode it instead, right off the beginning. Hopefully we'll get a transform on one of those 2 troops this time around. It's only 20% chance. I did transform a troop, however, not the one I want to transform, so a little unfortunate, but at least it did something if nothing else. So we'll go and get another Mountain Crusher down, take those reds first, just because we need it for Queen Titania, of course, get our little bit of mana that we need off our explosion, and then we just go straight into a Queen Titania. Not enough for an extra turn. I'm actually going to go for Skull first, and then we'll go for Queen Titania. Hopefully it does not kill Hero. However, this does have a 100% chance to summon a Fae every single cast. It's a little bit like a Christine X in that regard, just without the board control, and that it will constantly keep getting summons. And in this case, the summons could actually potentially be pretty good. A random Fae means any Fae in the game. That could theoretically be even things like Queen Titania and any other Fae that exists. So there are some good things that it could potentially summon off of it. So right here, as you can see, we'll guarantee get something there, and it ends up doing that one Fae Dragon thing, which apparently I haven't maxed yet, for the fact that it's legendary. But there we go. So yeah, definitely can get some pretty decent summons. There are some pretty decent Fae legends, and there are a few mythics that are Fae as well, all of which it can summon. So of course it can also summon the really weak common and rare Faes and stuff like that. But overall, an okay troop. Definitely, I would say, worth getting, just for the sake of having it around. Though at the moment, I don't believe it's meta for anything, though it might be able to kind of incorporate into various Guild War related teams if you do want to use it for that purpose. Do keep in mind, if you were to use a team like this for Guild Wars, you most likely would want to replace out Hero or something for a purple, though of course you can get away with triple of a color for Guild Wars if you want to. Use that for if you feel like using 4 of the same color is a little bit too difficult. Other than that, I want to find a little bit of a weak battle. Not that weak. Let's see, a little bit of a weak mid-range battle just to show this other team real quick, and that is the early game version of the boost ratio team. I guess this one's decent enough to show it. So one other thing, Merlantis, of course we're getting the Merlantis hero class this Friday. If you're going to use a team, you're most likely going to use Mountain Crusher or Mang into the Murvrox, which will end up creating a bunch of blue, Azura, and Undyne to get that event done. If you don't have Undyne, you'd want to use Nimue there instead, and just go with a team like that. And that would help you get through most of the event, if not all of the events, for this Friday. Other than that, let's go into this final one here, and this is using the Lapina Explorer. Of course, you can just put this into a random, decent team just to get 400 gold this week, but here's something that you could viably use as a low-level player. Every single thing on this team is ridiculously easy to obtain. The Titan Hero class is obtained automatically just from going and doing the Stormheim Kingdom. You'd want to get that to at least level 40 so that you can get Brown Storm at start of battle, as well as Barrier every single time you take a Brown, and that will make it so you have a really solid tank. This you get for free this week, pretty much. You just have to spend 300 glory on the pack, and you already have a copy. Otherwise, into the future, you'll easily be able to get it on things like Glory and Gem Keys. Rock Spirit, similarly, you'd easily be able to get it on Glory and Gem Keys. It's just something you pick up, and it's a decent early game troop due to its boost ratio. And Elowin you get for free just for completing out the Pan's Veil Kingdom. At the end of the questline, you end up getting this, and this also has a really solid boost ratio. Generally, when running teams earlier on in the game, you want to run things that have really good boost ratios that are based on a static number of things. such as something like how many troops of a certain type are on your team, or how many of a certain gem are on the board. And in the case of all 3 of these instances, all of them boost based on how many of a certain thing is on the board, making all these particularly good for early game, because how many things are on the board can never be increased since the board is always at 8x8. So these kind of boost ratios work particularly well earlier on in the game, simply because they never get any stronger. The amount of boost ratio we're getting off of these would be the same this late in the game as it would be at level 50. So generally, the earlier you are in the game, the more powerful these things are going to be. So right here, we're actually not going to be able to get that kill most likely on that first slot, because it's going to move one of the first 2 to the back. So if I go and do this real quick, you'll see that, actually first I need to go and decide where we want that. So we'll do that. But as you can see, it moves the Element Grim back. It'll either move the first slot or the second one in line to back. And in that case, it ended up doing the Element Grim to the back. So we did still end up getting that kill. You do have to be careful with that, because it could potentially move the one you want to hit to the back. And if there's not 2 enemies on the opposing team, then you're kind of just removing what you're, or moving the troop that you kind of wanted to hit. So do be wary of that, but it is a good way to disorient the team if they're doing something like a skull spam team or something else. Early on in the game, a lot of people tend to use hero in first slot too, because they want to use it as their tank. And if this ends up moving their first slot to last, that would be particularly good as well. I'll just keep doing that on greens, keep getting our boost ratio, and yeah, just kill it out pretty easily. We get 400 gold for doing that. Of course, you can put it onto a normal team, but that's just something that you can end up doing for earlier on in the game. Anyways, guys, that'll pretty much wrap it up for this video. If you guys still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. As I mentioned, new Mythic and new class is Friday. The Mythic is going to be completely useless, but the Hero class is going to be pretty solid. Potentially one of the better ones in the game, and definitely the best Submerge option for any Hero class. So we'll see how that ends up panning out. Feel free to leave any questions below, and I will catch all of you later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.